Well, hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of the Therapy Show. I am so excited for you to meet this week's guest. Her name is Teva Johnstone. Welcome, Teva. It's so awesome to have you.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so I got to be honest, I'll let everybody know how I find my guests. I think I've been, y'all know I stalk people on Instagram here and there. And I came across Teva when she did an interview with Alex Clark of The Spillover. And I was just taken back by just like you and your presence and your honesty and your voice and what you're doing. And I just thought, man, it would be so cool to have you on the show and have you share who you are and what you're doing with the listeners of the therapy show because you're doing some really cool things. Could
Thank
you
you.
give us some information and background on who you are and how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely. So, I am a licensed clinical social worker in the state of California. I have been a therapist and social worker for about 8 years,
Mhm.
including graduate school. And the all of my career has been with children and teens and parents.
Okay.
And I've worked in many different settings, school-based settings, private practice settings, foster care settings. And I got my license to practice independently right in the middle of the pandemic.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Hmm.
And so normally when people get their license to practice independently, you go out and you lease a space. But where I was here in California, nobody was leasing spaces. Everybody was leaving their offices. So I opened a practice out of my home and I did some therapy with kids for a while on Zoom and realized that was really hard. It was like herding cats.
I bet. I can only
Yeah,
imagine.
kids and Zoom, they don't go very well together.
Hmm.
So I pivoted and now I do consulting and coaching with parents.
Okay. And do you have a specific population that you or that you work with?
I do. I do. I see a lot of parents of children with autism, ADHD, or what we call spirited, highly sensitive, the orchid child, which is, a sensitive child needs their environment kind of just right.
Hmm.
So, yes, autism is primarily it, and then some ADHD and some kids who don't quite have a diagnosis. Maybe they come close to having to meeting clinical criteria, but not quite there. But we know these kids are different. And so we
Gotcha.
sometimes refer to them as spirited.
Okay. And so how did you get into the work with this population? Like what drew you to them?
Sure. Let's see. When I became a mom, I recognized that I had a daughter who was spirited.
Hmm.
Yes,
Okay.
just more intense, more active, met developmental milestones really early. Just a different temperament than my friends' kids.
Okay.
Needed to be held all the time. Just yeah, an amazing child. And what I later learned, oh, she's one of these kids. She's spirited. She's an orchid child.
Hmm.
So I got really into studying what some used to call high functioning autism, neurodivergent. I just got really into studying the kids who are just kind of extra,
Hmm.
who don't fit into these ideas of easy kids and compliant kids necessarily. They ask questions, they think for themselves. So yes, I'm a mother to one of these girls.
Hmm.
So I just started studying it and then advertising that I support these families, and they started flocking to me. And I started posting on Instagram a lot about it.
Yeah.
And then you know how things go.
Right.
People just,
Yeah. And I think your story is just it's so cool because you pivoted. Like you made a decision to pivot. And I can only imagine trying to do therapy with children on Zoom. Like
yeah.
I mean, we were doing Zoom school and I would like come in the room and watch. And I was like, how are these teachers doing this? So I can only
Yeah.
imagine when you're trying to do therapy with a child on Zoom, gosh, like you said, herding cats.
Especially the
Yeah.
young ones. Teens, somewhat it can be worked with,
Hmm.
but the younger ones, which is who I used to see, it's really hard.
Yeah. Did
Because
you,
yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, doing therapy with a child, it's so relational
Hmm.
and so affect based and play based, and there's a lot of movement and art, and you know the affect dynamic between the therapist and client is so important,
Right.
and that's really hard to achieve on Zoom.
Right.
So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I've had a couple play therapists on the show, and I think they would definitely be nodding their head and agreeing with you. And it has been struggles for many of them to be able to have you know, what they would call probably a not the, what's the word I'm looking for, an effective practice over, you know, doing it over Zoom or over virtual. And it's hard
Mhm.
enough for adults, you know, like
It
it
is.
is. So do you still have your clinical license? Did you keep
I
it? Like
do.
you do?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
I still have my clinical license.
Yeah. Do you feel
Yeah.
like, how do you feel about kind of pivoting and shifting um your skills? Like what's that been like?
You know, it's been such an interesting growth process, and like real journey of digging deep on my values and the kind of life I want to live, and like where my gifts are. Like, where are my gifts versus what does society need? And how can we join those two? And I serve the best that I can. So it's been interesting. Honestly, I love the pivot.
Yeah.
I like it more than being a traditional therapist.
Yeah.
I like it because, well, first of all, I can serve people outside of California,
Right.
which just makes my heart sing because there's so much need. And when you're public on, say, Instagram as a therapist and doing advocacy, people want to see you all over. And it's hard to be able to say, no, sorry, I can't, you know? So I don't do clinical work outside of California, but being able to provide education and coaching just feels so aligned. And stepping back from that role of traditional psychotherapist, I feel that I'm able to be more authentically me. I
Yeah.
know it sounds so cliche, but it just feels like I can like let my personality come through more. It's not as stiff.
Hmm.
There aren't so many bureaucratic agencies to deal with. I love therapists, but we have to admit that we're a little rigid
Hmm.
in some ways. And it's just a more lighthearted way to work. And I get to serve more broadly, which is aligned with, you know, like my faith practice, and it just feels really, it feels so right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I can totally relate. I mean, and when you said there's like, I mean, it's almost like this freedom. Um, when I talk about the coaching I do versus the therapy I do, it's such a different, I'm like two different people almost. It's weird. It's
Yeah.
like because we have
Yeah.
this license, this clinical, this piece of paper that gives us license to practice, and we have to
Mhm.
operate within these, you know, guidelines and these rules, which are there for a reason. I understand,
Sure.
but at the same time, we're humans too, and we want to be
Mhm.
able to show our personality, and we want to be able to try to, I mean, gosh, with social media, people are looking to, we look to connect to the
Mhm.
people we're following, and we look to know more about them. And
Mhm.
it's really amazing, like what social media has done
It's true.
on so many levels, good and bad. And you know, I always say
Yeah.
it's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
Um, okay, well, so I'm just really curious about your process. Like when you decided to do more of the coaching,
Mhm.
did you take a class or certification or training, or did you just say, hey, I have what I need, I'm just gonna go for it?
Definitely. What I did, well, the number one piece that was important to me was like the legalities.
Yeah.
So I had a bunch of legal consults
Mhm.
with the National Association of Social Workers, my malpractice insurance coverage. I took out another policy for coaching,
Mhm.
like same insurance coverage as my psychotherapy practice that's on pause right now.
Mm.
But so I just wanted to like put all my legal ducks in a row.
Sure.
And then I did take some kind of coaching. I don't even remember the agency course online. And I was like, I already know this stuff as a therapist.
Right.
Like, we're trained in this
Mhm.
already, but more so, I did have some consultations with coaches about, you know, where the like ethical lines are. And I've done tons of training in various modalities like DIR floor time, which is for kids with autism and other neurodevelopmental disabilities, but they teach us how to coach parents.
Mhm.
So I definitely felt like I was well equipped. It was just finding that spot where you feel like, okay, I am standing in this role now, because all up until that time, I've been trained to be in this other role
Right.
as a clinical social worker
Right.
who would never show a picture of her dining room on social media, because that
Right.
would be considered like, ooh, boundaries.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I can show my dining room on social media because I'm not practicing in that kind of traditional way. So it
Mhm.
feels good.
Yeah.
It feels really great. And it feels it feels so much more optimistic. It doesn't feel like I'm chasing after problems. It
Mm.
doesn't feel like I'm holding a fire extinguisher trying to put out all these fires with symptom management that we do in, social
Mm.
work and psychotherapy. It feels more preventative.
Right.
And for kids, it's like, why, if we can prevent it from getting that bad, why not?
Right.
And I can help parents do that.
Yeah.
And parents don't have to spend a fortune on experts to keep their kids well
Yes. Yes.
if they can catch things early.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I feel like I'm really in this role of helping to turn around the children's mental health crisis in a way that is more accessible
Mm.
and more puts the power back in the hands of the parents rather than the experts.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that for so many reasons, being a marriage and family therapist. Like,
Mhm.
you just explain I mean, that's prevention right there is how do you help, empower parents to know their children and to be able to have conversations with their children and identify issues, um, before they turn into anything. And
Yeah.
that's just and I think maybe that's partly why, I went back to school to be a marriage and family therapist is because I knew one day I wanted to have children and I wanted to, like, educate myself on
Yeah.
what do healthy children do and what do they look like and how do you raise healthy children?
Mhm.
And, I mean, I'm sure both of us could go on for hours about stories where it's almost like it's too late. Like,
Mhm.
this family presents, and you're like, "Oh, if only this could have
Yeah.
happened years ago."
Yeah.
It's hard, and I see that
Mhm.
happening, with my children. I have 2 daughters and, some of their peers out there,
Mhm.
and I'm not judging. I don't want people to think like I'm judging the families or what's going on, but
Mhm.
and there's so many things that go on behind closed doors that we don't know and we don't need to know, but
Yeah.
it's like I love that. I love if you can prevent a child having to, have their parents pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for therapy when
Yeah.
these things can be taught in the home.
Yeah.
um, I just think that's beautiful. And I'm a big advocate of waiting for children to have screens and, social media.
Mhm.
And, I'm just curious, do you like, when you're talking to parents, is that one of the things that, for this population that you work with, is that a detriment to their mental health? Like,
Mhm.
starting out screens too soon or too much? What do you notice?
Yes. I mean, we have the research is coming out more and more every day. The work of Jonathan Haidt.
Mhm,
He doesn't focus on neurodevelopmental disabilities, but he focuses more broadly.
mhm,
Yes, it's definitely a risk. And parents have a hard time with this one. In the autism and ADHD world, parents struggle to implement limits
mm,
on the screen for various reasons. One of the reasons is because these kids are very persistent
mhm.
and they push back and they push back hard and they wear their parents down until the parents finally say, yes, fine, have it,
Right,
right? They're just so tired. And I
right.
get it.
Yeah.
Parents have a lot on their plate today and it's stressful and it's hard to have a persistent child.
Mhm,
Um, and then another reason why parents struggle with this, and this is kind of an ongoing debate in this corner of the field, parents think that their children can only regulate with a screen.
mhm.
and they say, I give my child the screen, and then the child can self-regulate. And then, of course, a regulated child is easier to parent, right? Especially when parents exhausted. Because when we're exhausted, we don't have the skills to co-regulate them like they need.
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of a short-term band-aid.
Yeah.
And I have compassion for parents who hold those beliefs, but I think that there are better ways. And I think that it's true. It might be a little bit harder for a while until it gets better when you're reducing the screen.
Right.
But we know that autistic and ADHD kids have a tendency to hyper focus and fixate on these things, and they just get overstimulated. And yeah, they might appear like they're regulated, but like drugs make you appear regulated. It doesn't mean that it's a good thing,
Right.
And then, of course, it depends on the content that they're consuming and the amount of time that they're on. All these things matter. There is nuance to this conversation.
Sure.
But these kids are at risk, especially if they're on more than 2 hours a day, especially if they're girls, especially if they're on social media, especially if they have other risk factors like mental health conditions, autism, ADHD. It's, in my opinion, it's like dropping them off in a bad neighborhood.
Yeah.
And hoping it'll be okay.
Yeah. I mean, I can agree with you on that, and I'll just say, like, even children who don't have the ADHD or the autism spectrum, diagnosis. I mean, I don't feel like it's good for anybody until gosh, I'm almost 50 years old. It's not good for me, right? Like,
it's not good for me. I know what it does to me.
Yeah.
I absolutely know what it does to me.
Yeah.
And I have a fully developed brain. I've lived through some things. I have quite a bit of resilience. And if we're honest with ourselves, we know what it does to us.
Right.
I think that we are somewhat living in denial because parents have come to rely on it as a crutch. And also, frankly, it's really hard to keep saying no, especially when your child's whole friend group or whole school, has it. It's hard, but parenting is hard.
Right. Right.
Making right choices is hard. We're trying to teach this to kids. We can't do it ourselves.
Right.
So
that's really
I'm passionate about this topic.
Yeah, I know. And I love it. I love you have you have a lot of passions. And I think that's something that we should kind of touch on a little bit. What else are you passionate about?
Oh, there are several things. I'm very passionate about opting out of traditional school.
Okay.
I'm passionate about homeschooling and unschooling.
Can you tell us what unschooling is? Like, how do you define that? I'm fascinated by this.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So there's not really an easy definition, but unschooling is a philosophical and practical approach to education. I'm doing a spectrum.
Yes.
You can't see.
Be sure to watch the video on YouTube.
Yes.
See our beautiful hair days. We've already
Yes. I'm fluffing up for you here.
And I'm disheveled. So you guys, anyway. Okay. So
so unschooling is an educational philosophy and practice that ranges along a spectrum. So no two unschooling families are going to believe the exact same things or do the exact same things. But essentially, if we strip it down, it's really a belief in education without coercion, education with respect for the child's autonomy and dignity and worth. It's education that really honors the developmental stage of the child, honors the child's innate drive to learn, and does not try to replicate the traditional school environment at home.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of self-directed learning, but there's also taking classes where there is a teacher giving a lesson. So this is why it's kind of hard to put into a box, but it's really a mindset that respects children, respects their natural drive to learn, treats them with dignity and respect, and like sets up a rich environment that supports self-directed learning.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I love the idea of that. I mean, my mom heart is just exploding at that. I'm like, oh, I would love that. However, I work a full-time job, right?
Sure.
And I'm a full-time mom and I'm a full-time wife. So all the things like, so as a mom who's that sounds wonderful. And I have to be honest with you, like our kids have had a pretty decent experience in our school system here.
That's
But
great.
we are very involved and we're very processing with them. What did you learn today? Okay, let's talk
Mhm.
about that discussion your social studies teacher had with you. Here's another viewpoint of that.
Uh-huh.
So
Good
we're
for
very
you.
much involved about what they're learning, and I think that's
Mhm.
one of the things that my kids are like. We enjoy that. Like it's a nice conversation, dinner conversation. But let's say I am wanting to do that, and I'm like, Teva, show me, how do I do this? Like, where do I start as a mom who works outside the home, but also wants to give this experience to her children?
Mhm. Mhm. The very first place to start is recognizing that we were never meant to raise children alone,
Hmm.
and that includes educating children. And so building community.
Okay.
That is the very first place to start, is building community and then figuring out how your child can receive a rich, stimulating, social, educational education experience. I was trying not to use that word again.
Yeah.
Um, in a way that's aligned with your values, that also allows you to still maintain your other responsibilities like your career.
Hmm.
Yeah. So in my course, I show parents how to do it literally step by step.
Okay.
But the number one thing is that it's a mindset shift. When we are opting out of traditional school, we are using our own agency to give our kids what we believe to be the best for them. And that doesn't necessarily mean that our child is at the dining table all day long. Like, I don't think that that's the best for kids. At least not mine.
Right. Yeah.
She's an only child, that would be dreadful for
Hmm.
her social development. So for that mom who has other responsibilities, I say turn to the community, build the community, find the community, and
Hmm.
I help parents do that.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful. I do have a friend, come to think of it, many years ago, she decided to homeschool her kids. And I remember thinking she was a social worker too. And if she's
Oh,
listening,
wow.
you know who I'm talking to. And it was on her heart that she had to homeschool. And she's got 4 kids. And last time I talked to her, they were all homeschooled and she was loving it. And she wasn't working, or hasn't worked in a number of years. So she could really be involved and engaged. But my thought around it was like like the mom just was so involved, like I
Yeah.
guess that's just maybe what I've seen on TV or how they
Mhm.
dramatize it on shows like the homeschool
Sure.
mindset. But it's just nowadays it sounds like there's so many options for
Yeah.
homeschooling.
Yeah.
You really have so many different ways you can do it, which I think is so
You
cool.
do. You absolutely do. And more power to those moms who carry the majority of it on their own and are super involved. Um, I'm involved, but not as much as the TV homeschooling mom, because I also have a career
Sure.
and I have one child. Like if I had 5 or 6 kids all around the dining table, that would be different,
Right. Hmm.
But with one child, like children are supposed to be around other children.
Hmm.
So I've made a point to build our community to be able to give that to my child.
Yeah.
But there are so many ways to homeschool. I like to describe it like there are so many ways to have a career.
Sure. Yeah.
Some people, for their career, they install air conditioning. Some people, for their career, they operate on heart attack victims. It's like the
Right.
scale is so broad, right?
Right. Hmm.
And so it's the same thing with homeschoolers. Like some homeschoolers look a certain way. They're at their dining table. They have a family of 6. Mom is doing 99.9% of it. And other homeschoolers are maybe more like me, where I have a career. My daughter is very involved in the community. We are rarely, if ever, at our dining table,
Hmm.
and we're still homeschoolers. So
Yeah.
I like to get that message out that there's like so many ways to do it.
Yeah. That's so great. Now I could be wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong, but did I see in one of your Instagram posts or something that your daughter's father, you had to convince him that, is that right?
Um,
Or did I
yeah,
misread that
no,
or
no,
something?
no,
Oh, okay.
no, that's okay. He has a different memory of how we started homeschooling. So that's why I paused there for a second. I'm getting ready to interview him
Oh,
and
cool.
we'll get his story on the
Uh-huh.
record. But yeah, he says that he was reluctant.
Mhm.
I didn't see a whole lot of reluctance, but there was definitely some there. And I'll let him tell his story. But one thing that was influential in allowing him to really accept that it was the best thing for our daughter was speaking with another man
Okay.
who was not like this like hippy dippy California dude. Nothing wrong with hippies. I love hippies. But my daughter's father, that kind of presentation wouldn't have impressed him to homeschool. Nor would have the super religious father who
Mm.
says, this is what God calls us to do. Like
Right.
neither one of those would
Mhm.
have fit for him.
Mhm.
But we know a man in our community. He's an award-winning high school biology teacher and a homeschooling advocate. And he spoke with my daughter's father, and that did it for us.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
yeah, it's there's more twists and turns, but that's
Sure.
kind of the basic. Mhm.
Has he been is he involved with the school, with her schooling, unschooling?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. So for your listeners who don't know, we co-parent. We're not
Mhm.
married. We
Okay.
don't live together. And he is very involved.
Yeah.
He's a proud homeschooling dad. He has a career. He has a quite a career actually. He travels the world. He's a photojournalist. He's on call for big news stories. Um, and he still makes a point to be very involved with our daughter's education. So I feel so fortunate
Oh,
for
that's cool.
myself and for her.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
what an unschooling experience, when she's old enough one day, she can go on assignment with them or something. That's
I know, that's
really cool.
true.
I
That's
wanna be
true.
one of your kids and learn in your no, just kidding.
I
Can I
know.
come?
I want this kind of school too.
Yeah. Man, man.
You know how people say like, "Oh, I'm reparenting myself." There's
Oh,
that
yeah.
kind of phrase in our field. I don't feel like I'm reparenting myself, but I didn't have the best public education experience starting from about second grade on.
Okay.
And I feel so much gratitude that I'm able to give my daughter a complete 180 from what I had.
Yeah.
And it feels like, having a corrective experience,
Sure. Oh, yeah.
so I just brings tears to my eyes. So
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
I love that. I think that's really cool that you can identify it as a corrective experience for yourself. And
Yeah.
so you're getting just as much out of it as she is.
Oh,
I
I
think that's
am. My
wonderful.
heart is so full.
Yeah.
My heart is so full. Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to share or you feel like would be helpful for my listeners to learn more about like you and the homeschooling program or anything?
Yeah. I guess I would just say if any of your listeners have homeschooling on their heart
Hmm.
for any reason, and let me just tell you some of the reasons I normally hear. The child is autistic or ADHD or suspected autism, and the school is not serving them well.
Okay.
The school is just not a fit for their child. These are the parents who seek me out.
Hmm.
The parents who seek me out also are really concerned about the political climate in the schools
Hmm.
and how that bleeds into some of the curriculum and
Hmm.
some of the school culture.
Yes.
Parents seek me out for those purposes. They are not okay with their child getting an ideological education. They
Hmm.
want their child to get just a classically decent education and not be what some call indoctrinated into
Sure.
some of these beliefs. So those parents also seek me out. I also have parents seek me out who, they do have to maintain employment I live in a very expensive state.
Mhm.
Maybe you do too, but California, it's
Yeah.
really hard to have a single income family. So there's a lot of working moms,
Yeah.
and these working moms also want their children to have high quality education, and they want their children to have a childhood that feels preserved
Right.
and not a rat race, or not adultifying these kids so young with inappropriate material.
Hmm.
So what I want parents to know is that it's okay if you're not a traditionally religious family with 6 or more kids, this vision that we've all been fed of what the homeschooling family looks like. You don't have to be that family to homeschool. It's okay if you have a career you have to maintain. There are ways for you too.
Hmm.
And it's okay if you're not, a conspiracy theorist, distrusting of the government. Those people are welcome as well. And I align very much with some of those sentiments. I have a healthy kind of distrust of the establishment, if you will. But you don't have to be any of those stereotypes to homeschool. Homeschooling is for everybody.
Sure.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Homeschooling is for everybody who feels it could be a good fit for their family and their child. And
Yeah.
I can help.
So I think one of the reasons that I love what you're saying and what you're doing is because you are a licensed therapist and you can you don't, not that you don't have a dog in the fight, but you can see all the different sides. You're not gonna take a side. You're here to help the family and to help the child and have that give that child the best education and experience possible. And I just think that's beautiful. Um, yeah, gosh.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we could just talk for hours about so many things, but I
Definitely.
I
I
want to
love talking
respect
about this stuff.
I want to respect your time and your energy and you have things going on. I am curious, has your daughter ever been in the public school system?
She has not.
Okay.
So when she was around 2.5, I needed to get out in the field and start earning my clinical hours.
Hmm.
So I got my MSW, my graduate degree, before I became a mom.
Okay.
Then I right away went into motherhood, and I stayed home with my daughter for about 2.5 years full time.
Mhm.
And then it was time for me to start getting those, post grad clinical hours. So my daughter went to an outdoor play based preschool.
Oh, cool.
They call it preschool, but 2.5, let's be honest,
Right.
it's daycare. And
Right.
that's okay. It's
Yeah.
daycare. And it was a very high quality daycare. They played in the mud all day long. They sang songs. Everything was outside. They had chickens and bunnies, and it was beautiful.
Mm.
So she did that from about 2.5, just part time, to age 5. And right before she turned 5, we decided we were definitely homeschooling.
Okay. Hmm.
We knew we would never send her to public school just based on her temperament. We just knew that that would not be a fit for us. But we were kind of like, oh, could we afford one of these hippie private schools,
Yeah.
that are spend a lot of time outdoors and more aligned with our views of child development.
Hmm.
But we couldn't afford them.
Yeah.
And we saw how she was thriving in this outdoor play-based program without any adult coercion. She was writing, she was starting to read by choice. She just loved to learn. So we said, how are we going to maintain that?
Hmm. Hmm.
What she's already doing is working, and she's nearly 5. So we're not going to switch it up. We're just going to keep going as we're going.
Yeah.
And so just before she turned 5, we decided we like kind of locked down our homeschool plan. And then next thing you know, the pandemic hit.
Mhm.
And everybody was, scammering with their Zoom kindergarten and all that. We didn't have to do Zoom kindergarten because homeschool was our plan A. And we had already signed up for like homeschool enrichment programs. So during the pandemic, my daughter was out of the house 5 days a week, outdoors, socializing with a pod of friends. in a very enriched environment. And we weren't doing Zoom kindergarten,
Yeah.
which should have never happened for
I
anybody.
know. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah.
So it was always our plan A to
Mhm.
opt out of typical school.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So from the get-go, you knew that it wasn't gonna be for you guys. Okay. I
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Are there other factors that maybe uh drove that decision even more? Like where in the school system, I mean, I'm in South Carolina. It's
Uh-huh.
different here. We have
Yeah.
issues, but it's probably a little bit different than California.
Yeah.
In terms of like possibly what is being taught in the classroom.
Sure.
And I attribute that to I live in a very conservative state.
Okay.
Um, how is it different in California? I mean, I don't know if that's a loaded question, but man, I
Oh
can
no,
only imagine.
I'm happy to share.
Yeah.
Our personal decision didn't have anything to do with the
Mhm.
curriculum
Okay.
because we had already made the choice that we would be opting out of public school so early on. I didn't even know of any of the cultural political stuff happening in
Mhm.
the schools. So a lot of families come to me for these reasons, and I would never ever send my daughter for these reasons. It only reinforces our choice, but it
Wasn't the
wasn't
choice, the
instrumental in
reason.
our
Okay.
choice.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. But yes, in California, we probably have the exact opposite of what's maybe being taught in your schools. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's intense. The kids are being taught really strongly loaded ideological lessons that are based on academic theories that were designed for adults on university campuses. And they're being taught these ideas about race and gender and oppression that are really theories and
Mhm.
philosophies that are meant to be dissected and argued against.
Mhm.
They're being taught them as fact
Yeah.
with no room to dissent
Right.
and at a stage that is developmentally inappropriate.
Right.
So there's numerous things here. They're theories, they're not facts.
Mhm.
They're being taught as fact. They're being taught as fact at a massively developmentally misaligned stage. And I believe that this is harmful to children.
Yeah. I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
And I think from oh my gosh. I mean, I agree with you on all of those things, and especially the developmentally appropriateness of these theories on a child. It's like
Yeah.
I don't understand how educators who have been through these supposedly developmental psych classes, because as a teacher, I'm guessing you take those classes. I mean, right? Like,
I don't know that that's true.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm saying that based on my education where I went to grad school because my program was in the College of Education, and I'm pretty sure I could be
Okay.
wrong. I'm pretty sure that the the teachers coming out of that program had to take some type. I could be wrong, but I've always assumed that. And so from the get-go, I was always like when I would see stuff that would come across my email from the school district, I was always like, did these teachers not take developmental,
Yeah.
developmental psych? So
Yeah.
I can understand that. And I think that's always kind of the thing that's bothered me the most as a therapist. I just could see how this isn't appropriate.
No.
So
No.
and so what you're saying is a lot of the parents that come to you are recognizing this in their school system and they want another option. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And these are parents who are lifelong liberals. They
Mhm.
live on the West Coast of the
Yeah.
United States, and they're tired of it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think and I'm just kind of my own, I don't know if my mom's going to shoot me for saying this or not, but it's very telling when your own mother, who her entire life has voted Democrat, says to you, I think this time I'm going to vote differently. And I about like, whoa. Um, so I think that people are just kind of tired
Mhm.
of it, and it just doesn't make sense
It's true.
for it really. But you know what? You are doing amazing work, and you are helping these families and giving them what they so want and need. And I'm hopeful that not that I want to take away the work that you're doing, but I hope other people out there, if you feel compelled to do something different with your skill set, like look to Teva and what she's doing and how she's impacting on such a broader scale. It's very inspiring, very, very inspiring. So I
Thank you.
appreciate you so much. Is there anything else? Well, maybe we should go over how people can find you, how they can learn more about you,
Sure.
all that good stuff. So tell us all the
Absolutely.
deets.
Yes, I would love for your listeners to come on over and say hi on my Instagram.
Mhm,
I'm at rebel.parents. So
mhm.
rebel parents, but there's a dot between the two words.
Okay.
And then my website is tevajohnstone.com.
Okay.
And on the website, parents and therapists can find my offerings. I have an online course for parents on how to homeschool for children's mental health. I also offer one-to-one consulting, and all that can be found on my website.
Okay. And I'll put all the links in the show notes, you guys, so you can go and just
Thank you.
click and head on over there. Well, oh my gosh, thank you again for being on the podcast. It's been
Thank you,
so great
Lisa.
to know you, get to know you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was so great to talk with you.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine.
Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content.
And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.